She laughed so hard, she covered her mouth with both hands, like she always did when she was truly amused. Except this time, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at him. I sat 3 feet away, staring into my untouched drink, while my wife let another man make her forget I even existed. They were whispering again. Her eyes sparkled. His hand was resting on the back of her chair, close enough to graze her hair, but not quite. A careful violation. A practiced move. I noticed. She didn't seem to care. The waitress came by with the check. She didn't even glance at it. Neither did he. I paid, like I always do. Then I stood up. She looked surprised. Not guilty. Not nervous. Just surprised. As if she had genuinely forgotten I was there. I didn't say a word. Didn't throw a drink. Didn't demand answers. Didn't ask, who is he? Because I already knew the answer. I think I knew it 2 months ago. I just walked. Out of the restaurant. Into the night. Into a silence I wasn't prepared for. I took the long way back to the car. Past the valet. Past the florist shop we used to stop at on Sundays. Past the bench where she once cried in my arms when her father got sick. All of it, still there. All of it, meaningless now. By the time I got to the car, my phone had lit up. Not from her. From him. You handled that with class, man. No hard feelings. I stared at the message like it was in another language. No hard feelings? This man, whoever he was, he had my wife's attention, her laughter, and now he had the audacity to thank me for stepping aside like I was handing her over at a bus stop. I didn't reply. Instead, I did something worse. I scrolled back, weeks back, through messages I hadn't read closely. Memes she'd sent me. Inside jokes. Conversations she claimed were girl talk. And suddenly, it clicked. She hadn't just been slipping away. She'd been planning her exit. And the worst part? I paid for the dinner where she finally pulled the trigger. But if she thought I would just disappear quietly, she was very, very wrong. The drive home felt like dragging my own body behind the wheel. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because even my own sadness was exhausted. I just stared at the dark road ahead, wondering how long this had been going on right in front of me. She didn't text. She didn't call. Not even to pretend. By the time I reached the house, I half expected her to be home already, curled up on the couch with a fake excuse. Maybe she'd say he was just a friend from work. That she laughed like that with everyone. That I was reading too much into it. Because I always read too much into everything, didn't I? But the house was still dark when I pulled into the driveway. I didn't go inside right away. I sat there for a while with the engine off, just breathing in the silence. You'd be surprised how loud nothing can be when your heart's cracked open. Eventually, I walked up to the front door like a guest, let myself in, and stood in the middle of our living room. The same room we once painted together, spilled wine in, danced barefoot at 2 a.m. just because the power was out and our playlist still worked on my phone. Now it felt like a stranger's home. I paced. I stared at the walls. I checked my phone again. No calls. No messages. Then I made a decision that felt both humiliating and inevitable. I opened her laptop. I know. That makes me the creep, right? The insecure husband. The guy who goes looking and ends up hurt. But what would you do after watching your wife laugh like a giddy teenager while her friend slid into your anniversary dinner? The laptop wasn't locked. She never bothered to change the password. Either she trusted me too much or didn't care anymore. I opened her email. Nothing obvious. I checked her search history. Harmless stuff. Instagram, home decor, overpriced travel blogs. But her messages? That's where the air shifted. She had an old Facebook Messenger tab open, not with Clay, but with someone named Ash. Not a coworker. Not a girl. Not anyone I'd ever heard of. There were hundreds of messages. Jokes. Flirty exchanges. Deleted threads. Then a voice note. I didn't even hesitate. I clicked play. And there it was, his voice. You should have told him tonight. He looked so clueless, Mal. Mal. No one called her that, but me. I froze. My pulse in my ears. My stomach in knots. I felt like I was standing naked in the middle of a storm I didn't even see coming. I couldn't listen to the rest. I closed the tab, backed away from the desk like it might bite me, and just stood there. She hadn't just emotionally checked out. She was cheating. Emotionally, for sure. Physically? Maybe. Probably. Hell, maybe for months. And yet, I still didn't break anything. I didn't scream. I didn't call her. I didn't even text her to ask why. I just sat on the edge of our bed, in the dark, staring at the pendant I had meant to give her that night. The one with our initials. I had it custom made. She never even saw it. And right then, I realized, maybe she wasn't going to come home at all. But what happened the next morning? That's when everything flipped. Because it wasn't her who knocked on our door at 7:12 a.m. It was him, Clay. And he wasn't there to apologize. He was there to confess. He stood on my porch like he belonged there. Clay, wearing the same smug face he had on last night, though now it looked more calculated. No blazer this time. Just a hoodie, jeans, and that same nauseating confidence that made my skin itch. I hadn't even gotten out of my pajamas. I was still in the same t-shirt I wore to bed. The same one she used to steal and sleep in before she stopped sleeping beside me altogether. I didn't say a word. I opened the door, arms crossed, waiting for whatever lie he was about to feed me. But instead, he asked, "Can we talk?" I should have slammed the door in his face. Any sane man would have. But I stepped aside, like a spineless host inviting the wolf into the sheepfold. I let him into my home, into our home, where our wedding photos still hung on the wall, where our scent still lingered on the couch cushions, where the last shred of my dignity was already dangling by a thread. He didn't sit. He just stood near the fireplace, hands in his pockets, like he owned the silence. "I just wanted you to hear it from me," he said, eyes darting between the floor and the framed picture of me and Mallory at Lake Erie. "She's been unhappy for a while. You probably know that." I swallowed the lump in my throat and said nothing. "I never meant to get in the middle of your marriage," he continued, which might be the most pathetic lie I've heard in my entire life. "But things happened. I didn't know how serious you two still were." She made it seem like. "Like what?" I cut in, my voice hoarse. "Like I was dead." He had the nerve to shrug. Shrug. "She told me you two were basically roommates." It hit like a slap. Not because it was entirely false. We had been drifting, but because she'd clearly been rehearsing her exit for so long. She had a script memorized for everyone but me. Then he said something I didn't expect. "She said you wouldn't take it well, that you might do something stupid. I figured I'd come by and show you I'm not here to fight." Oh, so now I was the unstable husband, the ticking time bomb, the sad, balding IT guy who gets left and goes viral for burning down the house. But I didn't snap. Instead, I stared at him and asked the one question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. "How long?" He looked away. "For months," he said. "Maybe 5. It started at her job, then kind of became more. We didn't mean for it to." I laughed. I didn't plan to, but I did. A hollow, ugly, stunned laugh. Because of course he'd say that. No one ever means to betray someone. It just happens, right? Like slipping on ice or tripping over your shoelace. You don't mean to cheat on your husband. You just fall onto another man's lap and forget to get up. I leaned against the wall, my pulse like a drum inside my ears. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than his voice as he kept babbling about how things got complicated, how he didn't want to be the bad guy, how Mallory had been struggling emotionally. Then he said, "She's not home, by the way. She stayed at my place last night. She didn't want to face you." There it was. Confirmation. The final nail. My wife didn't just bring her affair to dinner. She left with it. Slept in it. Woke up beside it. Clay started to walk toward the door like he'd just dropped off a package. Like his job was done. But then he paused and said something that cracked something deep inside me. "I think you should let her go, man. You seem like a decent guy. You'll find someone who fits you better." I closed the door behind him before I did something I couldn't take back. But the moment it shut, I didn't break down. I didn't scream. I didn't fall to the floor in sobs like some tragic movie scene. No, I walked back into the living room, sat on the couch where we used to watch trashy reality shows together, and I opened my laptop. Because if they were going to treat me like the quiet loser who just fades away, they'd better hope I stayed quiet. I started digging. Not into her phone this time. Not into his socials. But something else, something deeper. And what I found in her cloud backups. It wasn't just betrayal. It was ammunition. I don't think people realize how much of their life lives in the cloud until someone else starts looking. She must have thought she was careful. Private browser windows. Deleted messages. Logging out of shared apps. But what she didn't account for was how I set up her devices years ago, before all the resentment, before all the whispers, before the silence. She didn't change her iCloud password. And her backup settings? Still syncing daily. The first thing I noticed was the photo album named R. I assumed it was for reference, maybe mood boards for her photography. But what I opened instead was a collection of over 70 photos. Screenshots, mostly. Text conversations. Snippets of Clay's messages. Some were flirty, sure. Some were obscene. But what got me wasn't the content. It was the captions she left herself. Little notes under each screenshot. Like she was journaling through infidelity. Under one message that read, "You'd look better without that ring on," she wrote. "He always knows exactly what to say." Beneath a hotel booking confirmation from 2 months ago, God, I hope Russ doesn't find out. I feel guilty, but not enough to stop. And under a selfie, her, wrapped in a white towel, obviously not taken in our home, she wrote, "I love the way I feel with him. Alive. Alive." That word drilled into me like a needle through the eye. I scrolled farther. Voice memos. A video. She'd recorded herself talking about me. I didn't even know she did voice memos. "Russ doesn't fight back," she said in one. "He just absorbs everything. Like a sponge. I almost wish he'd scream or cheat or something so I could feel less like the villain." Another one was recorded in a car. She was giggling. "Clay said I should just be honest, but I think Russ would fall apart. Poor guy still thinks I'm his person. It's sweet. And sad." I couldn't keep going. I just sat there, staring at my own reflection in the laptop screen, as if some alternate version of me was watching from the other side. How do you even process something like that? When the person you built your whole world around narrates your worthlessness into a microphone like a podcast episode. But this wasn't over. Because deeper in the backups, I found something she definitely didn't mean to save. A screen recording. About 25 minutes long. I clicked play, expecting maybe a tutorial she made for her job or something work-related. What I watched instead made my skin go cold. It was her texting another man. Not Clay. Someone else. Different name. Different number. Same energy, except this guy? He wasn't gentle. His messages were possessive. Dominant. Explicit in ways that made even Clay's flirty texts look like Hallmark cards. And she was responding. Eagerly. Willingly. In ways she never even looked at me. Apparently, while she was publicly building this affair with the polished, well-dressed Clay, she was also sneaking around digitally with a man who called her his secret, who said he'd ruin her if she ever told. There was no name in the chat history, just an emoji in the contact, a wolf. I sat there, jaw clenched, fingers numb. For a second, I thought maybe I was going into shock. My mouth went dry, my chest tight. Clay was just the distraction. The real story was the man behind the emoji. And if Clay didn't even know about him, then maybe I wasn't the only one being used. A plan started forming, not out of rage, but out of something colder. A realization that I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was now the only one who knew the full picture. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth exposed. So I backed up everything. Every file, every screenshot, every voice note. I sent it to a clean drive, locked it in encrypted folders, and stored it on an external SSD I hadn't touched in years. And then I called Clay. Not to warn him, not to fight him, but to invite him over again. Because if Mallory wanted to play games, I was done folding. Now I was dealing. Clay arrived the next evening, just after 6. Right on time, of course. The type of guy who probably sends calendar invites for affairs and still shows up 5 minutes early to rehearse his fake sincerity in the mirror. He brought 2 coffees, like we were colleagues catching up after work. I didn't take mine. He asked if we could keep it civil, and I nearly laughed out loud, as if I had been the one who invited chaos into our marriage. Still, I gestured for him to sit. I didn't waste time. I slid the laptop across the table and hit play on the screen recording. He leaned in, probably assuming it was something related to him. Maybe a video of Mallory gushing about how much she loved him. But as the wolf emoji text started to appear, I saw his brows tighten, ever so slightly. He leaned closer, scrolled with his own hand, rewound, paused, played again. His jaw twitched. "Who the hell is this?" he muttered, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I just watched him now. I wanted to see exactly how much he knew. Because if he was in on it, if this was all some sick triangle they thought I'd quietly fold under, then he deserved everything that was coming. But his eyes didn't lie. He hadn't seen this. This was new to him. This betrayal hit him just as hard. "I thought it was just us," he finally said, voice cracking, and I don't know why, but something in that line made me almost feel sorry for him. Until I remembered he was the reason my anniversary ended in silence. He was the reason I'd slept alone in a bed that still smelled like her shampoo. He was the man who had the nerve to shake my hand while undoing everything I thought was sacred. No, I didn't feel bad for Clay. I felt vindicated. Seems like you weren't the only one she made feel special, I said, my tone sharper now. Guess she had more than one exit plan. He rubbed his face, leaned back, looked like someone had just punched a hole through his version of reality. He asked me for a copy of the files. I told him I'd think about it. But then came the part one hadn't planned for. Clay pulled out his phone, stared at it, then slowly turned it toward me. A message thread, not with Mallory, not with the wolf guy, but with someone named Serena. The name meant nothing to me, until he scrolled up far enough to show the pictures. Mallory. Same smile. Same body. Different outfit. Different setting. The timestamps? From over a year ago. Before Clay ever entered the picture. She used to send me these while still sleeping next to you, he said. I didn't know she was married back then. Found out later. Should have walked away, but I was already. I don't know. Hooked. I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to smash the phone. Another part wanted to laugh again, but I couldn't even summon the breath. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't even just cheating. It was layers. A history of calculated disloyalty. Multiple men. Multiple masks. And none of us knew who we were actually dealing with. But here's the kicker. The twist I didn't see coming. Clay scrolled to the very bottom of the thread. A message from Mallory, dated just 3 days ago, after our anniversary night. After that awful dinner. After she didn't come home. It read, he'll be out of the way soon. He's too soft to cause problems. Just be patient. I read it 3 times, but the words never changed. Out of the way. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being erased. Neatly, quietly, strategically. And both of them, Clay and I, were puppets in a play Mallory wrote a long time ago. But this time, I wasn't going to play the fool. I leaned back, folded my arms, and stared Clay dead in the eye. If we're both just pieces on her board, I said slowly, maybe it's time we flip the table. Because if Mallory wanted to manipulate 2 men behind closed doors, she wasn't going to like what happened when those 2 men stopped fighting each other and started digging together. And we were just getting started. I never thought I'd find myself sitting at a diner across from the man my wife was cheating with, casually eating hash browns and sketching out a plan, but there we were. The same guy I once considered the enemy was now leaning in, whispering like we were plotting a heist, and to some degree, maybe we were. Only instead of money, what we were after was something colder, the truth, and maybe a little controlled destruction. Clay and I had spent the last 3 days comparing notes, building a timeline, checking every message, backup, forwarded photo, timestamp, and deleted email. It turned out we'd both been used, lied to, and strung along like side characters in a story where Mallory was the director, producer, and lead actress. She was never reckless. No, she was precise. Every message she sent was layered in implication. Every, oops, selfie sent to the wrong person was deliberate. Every time she'd gaslit me for asking questions, she already had an alibi rehearsed. But what she hadn't counted on was both of her puppets growing a spine at the same time. The turning point came when Clay stumbled on a Venmo transaction buried in his account. It was from someone named T. Gray, a name neither of us recognized. The note attached simply said, "Thanks for the intro, Red Heart. The payment? $500. Sent 2 months ago, right after Clay said he and Mallory first started getting serious." That's when it clicked. She wasn't just cheating. She was networking. We dug deeper. T. Gray was Thomas Grayson, a name we found attached to a portfolio site, UX design, private clients, some minor freelance work. But what caught our attention wasn't what he did. It was who Mallory had referred to him. She'd connected Clay, through her job, to Thomas for branding help. In reality, she'd been grooming more than one man for months, rotating them in and out like she was building a personal roster of attention, sex, money, and convenience. Clay looked pale by the time we found a message between Mallory and Thomas discussing which one is closer to breaking. They were talking about us, like we were inventory. And I'll admit, for a moment, I spiraled. I went back and read old notes I'd written for our anniversaries, cringed at the playlist I once made her for our road trip to Asheville, remembered the night I waited outside the ER while her sister was in labor and brought her soup because she'd forgotten to eat that day. Every memory was now a scar. And the worst part? She'd let me keep loving her while she was already mentally repacking her life into someone else's arms. But pain is a funny thing. After a while, it burns clean. And once I passed through the hurt, what was left was something much colder. Not revenge exactly, but resolve. So we set a trap. We didn't scream. We didn't confront. We simply acted like everything was fine. Clay stopped replying to her for a few days, claimed he was sick, said he needed space. I told her I had a work conference in another city. She bought it without question. Of course she did. Her arrogance was now her biggest blind spot. The plan was simple. Give her enough rope to hang herself. We set up a decoy profile. Clay used an old business contact's name. We planted a conversation with Thomas in Mallory's DMs, one she wouldn't be able to resist reacting to. We let her think she was walking into a new opportunity. In reality, she was walking into a screen recording session, one where her eagerness to toss both of us aside would finally be captured without filters or edits. Within hours, she took the bait. The messages started rolling in. Her plans to phase out Clay, her complaints that I was still lingering emotionally, her fantasy of living alone, funded by at least one of them for now. She even included a line that chilled me. I don't even think Russ would fight me on the divorce. He's tired. I can tell. Which works out perfectly. She was right about one thing. I was tired. Tired of defending someone who was already halfway out the door. Tired of being painted as the weak one while she played puppet master behind the curtain. But what she didn't know, the curtain was coming down. And the next act, the one she hadn't written, was about to begin. Mallory always had a flair for drama. So it was fitting, really, that the beginning of her downfall looked like a performance. A performance she didn't know was being watched. We chose the gallery opening because it was her domain, her curated kingdom of abstract canvases, moody lighting, and clove-scented wine. She was invited as a guest speaker, which of course she turned into a spotlight moment. Clay and I had planned it meticulously. We arrived separately. We didn't speak, didn't look at each other. We simply blended into the crowd like shadows on opposite walls. Watching, she walked into the venue like a woman who owned the place. That same air of polished detachment. Charcoal wrap dress, bold red lipstick, not a hair out of place. Her mask was flawless. People greeted her. She smiled with just enough teeth to seem sincere. And I stood there, invisible to her, just 5 feet away, listening to her lie in real time. About her photography process. About her artistic journey. About the emotional honesty in her work. It would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so cruel. Because while she was sipping compliments, Clay was queuing up the files we'd prepared. Screenshots, audio clips, a carefully selected highlight reel of her double life. And while she toasted with curators and flirted with one of the event sponsors, Clay airdropped the file to a dozen devices across the gallery, quietly, anonymously. No drama, no announcement. Just digital truth sliding into the pockets of the very people she was trying to impress. And then we waited. It started with whispers. Someone near the back looked down at their phone and frowned. A few others followed, pulling their screens closer, tilting them away from the light. You could feel the atmosphere shift, not loud, not chaotic, just an eerie thinning of the air, like the room itself was exhaling. She noticed, eventually. Her eyes scanned the space as conversation slowed. She touched her hair once, then again. Her smile faltered. Then one of her colleagues, a woman I didn't know but who clearly mattered to her, walked up, phone in hand, expression frozen somewhere between confusion and disgust. She held up the screen. Mallory blinked. The silence that followed might have lasted 10 seconds or 10 years. All I remember is how her hand started trembling, just slightly, and how her voice cracked when she said, "Where did you get that?" The woman didn't answer. No one did, because by then, more phones were lighting up, more eyes narrowing. The same curated crowd that used to orbit her now looked at her like she'd started speaking a language they didn't understand. She looked around, searching for an anchor. And that's when she saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine across the room. She took one step forward, like she might say something. Like maybe she was going to explain, justify, lie her way out of it again. But I turned my back and walked out. Not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to say. Outside, Clay was already leaning against the railing, hands in his coat pockets, exhaling like he'd just dropped the weight of the world. He didn't smile. Neither did I. This wasn't about gloating. It was about taking back control. We walked a block in silence before he spoke. You think she'll ever admit what she did? I didn't even have to think about it. No, I said. But it doesn't matter anymore. The people she wanted to fool the most saw her without the mask. That's enough. He nodded. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Stillness. Not joy. Not closure. Just a quiet clarity that didn't ask for anything in return. But the story wasn't done yet. Because 2 days later, she came to my door. And in her hands wasn't an apology. It was an envelope. And what was inside proved she hadn't told us everything. She looked smaller somehow, standing on my porch. Her hair was in a messy bun. No makeup. No carefully curated expression. Just a tight-lipped hesitation and an envelope in her hand. She didn't speak right away. Just looked at me like she was seeing someone she used to know. Someone she'd forgotten was still capable of answering the door with a calm face and steady breath. I didn't know where else to go, she said finally. I didn't move. Didn't invite her in. Just nodded once, waiting. She held out the envelope like it was on fire. I took it. No eye contact. Her fingers brushed mine and flinched, like even that was too intimate now. It's not everything, but it's what I owe you, she said. Then she turned and walked down the steps without asking for permission. No hug. No tears. No last-ditch speech. The woman who used to promise forever walked away like someone clocking out for the last time. I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a long moment before I finally opened the envelope. Inside wasn't some grand confession. No apology card. No handwritten plea. Just a single folded sheet of paper and a check, to the cent, repaying me for the pendant I'd planned to give her on our anniversary. A detail I never told her I kept. The note read, "You deserve better. I just didn't know how to be honest when I stopped wanting to be saved. I'm sorry I let you carry all the weight." That was it. No excuses. No promises of change. No attempts to spin the story. Just the first and only honest sentence she'd given me in years. I stood there, holding the check in one hand, the letter in the other, and instead of anger, I felt relief. Because that was it. The end of her story and mine. I didn't cash the check. I didn't call her back. I didn't even text Clay to tell him what happened. Instead, I spent the weekend boxing up the remnants of our life together. I gave myself permission to delete the photos, to sell the furniture, to repaint the bedroom without asking anyone's opinion on the color. I put up blackout curtains and slept better than I had in months. I ate full meals. I sat in silence and didn't feel haunted by it. And then, I booked a trip. Not far. Just a quiet coastal town I'd read about once, but never had the nerve to visit. I left my phone off most of the time. I brought a stack of old books, a worn-out hoodie, and absolutely no expectations. On the third night, I watched the sun set over the cliffs and realized something I never thought I'd feel again. I wasn't broken anymore. Not bitter. Not vengeful. Just done. And free. Months later, I ran into someone. Not in a forced way. Not in some made-for-TV twist. Just two people with tired smiles and quiet hearts, standing next to each other in line for coffee. Her name was Elise. She liked poetry and old maps. She didn't ask me about my past until I was ready. And when I told her, she didn't look at me like I was weak. She just listened, held my hand across the table, and said, "You made it out. That's the part that matters." And she was right. The truth? Mallory's story doesn't live here anymore. This is my life now. And finally, it's mine again.